Good evening. I don't, Tom, I don't even know what the point is of like an initial introduction because nobody, unless for the recording, but it's almost like, good evening. Hi, how are you? And then no one's there. So I feel like you should just pause a moment. Hi, good evening and welcome. It is Tuesday, September 7th, 7:02 p.m. on the East Coast. This is Ethan with Just Ethan, except I have a dear friend and fellow advocate, Tom Smalley. Tonight we'll be discussing OCD and social anxiety, which I have a feeling many of us can relate to. So with that, as always, we'll take a couple minutes, let us know you're here. Say hello. You can tell us where you're from. I don't know. Generally, we like to throw out a fun question to answer. What are you thinking? I'm like favorite what today?
Favorite? No, we've done ice cream flavor before. Favorite place to vacation?
Oh, that's a good one. All right. So, what's your favorite place to vacation? Let us know. Feel free to fly us out there, and we'll join you. Depending, we're kind of picky. So there you go. Favorite vacation spot. Well said. If you're just joining us, this is Ethan. I got Tom with me. Be talking social anxiety and OCD tonight. So hey, Dave. Good to see you. So if you're just joining us, please say hello. Let us know you're here. If you want to know if you want to tell us where you're from, that's cool too. But more importantly, what is your favorite vacation spot? Oh, Puerto Rico, join us anytime. Wait,
all right,
so she lives in Puerto Rico. All right, we're in. I swear I went to 2019 before everything shut down in December. I went on a cruise and we had to stop in Puerto Rico, and it was seriously, Alexander, the best meal I've ever had in my life. Was at I have a picture of it somewhere. I should share my screen and just show this picture of this meal, but it was insane. It was so good. Liz Smith, Colorado, Estes Park. Oh, I do not. Oh, she wants to go. Sorry, the way you phrase it, because sometimes I say, sorry, Alexandra. The way we always like to say, tell us where you're from. And then, yes, gotcha. Okay. Well, we should all go to Puerto Rico for sure. Hello from South Carolina. She loves to vacation in Portland. Cool, Jess. Listening in from Ghana. Wow, welcome from Ghana. Thank you so much for joining us. Please show I love food. You know where I live. All right. So it's just about, I was so excited about our food situation here. I forgot we were doing the live stream. So real quick, if you're just joining us, welcome. We will be answering questions as always, and this will be as much of a conversation as we can make it. So with that, my name is Ethan. I'm a national advocate for the International OCD Foundation, which simply means I have OCD and I won't stop talking about it. Obviously, I have a guest with me today, Tom Smalley. I'll talk about Tom in 1 minute, but he's probably familiar to you. Hey, Kelly from Austin, Patricia from the UK. I hope I got that flag right. I'm pretty certain it's the UK. And Summer from Southeast Michigan. I like to, and Eric, king of all trivia from Houston, who likes to vacation in Colorado. And so do we and our family. And even Fran got a shout out from Alexandra. So that's awesome. Okay, let's get through some housekeeping and we'll jump into business.
Fran does deserve some love. I gotta be honest. He runs this stuff.
I agree. There's no lives without Fran. That's pretty much how it comes down to. This town hall is intended to serve as educational content, is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please be sure to work with your local provider or contact a local clinician. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. It should not be used if you're in distress or feel unsafe. If you're in crisis or you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room, call 911, or call the suicide prevention hotline at 800-273-8255. Hello from Brazil. What time is it in Ghana, incidentally? I'm curious. And thank you. Theo, thank you for tuning in. Also, always going to be respectful and kind of others. Create as safe a space as possible to have these conversations. Hey, Beth Carducci, how are you? We always want to keep in mind this is being recorded on social media and all platforms and will live there. So always keep that in mind when you ask questions or divulge personal information. But with that being said, we want to be here for you and you here for us and support each other and be as open and honest as we can be. The Nikki Bratley from Dublin, Ireland. That was a terrible accent. I'm never doing that again. Last time I did it, she said it sounded Scottish. That was just awful. So my guest tonight is becoming a more familiar face. You may recognize him from Anxiety in Athletes. Tom is a certified strength and conditioning specialist. Clearly, we haven't worked together. Through the National Strength and Conditioning Association, living in New York, New York. He has a master's degree in exercise and sports science from Merrimack College. He was diagnosed with OCD in 2014 at the age of 16, shortly after became passionate about spreading awareness about what OCD really is in an effort to break down the wall of stigma around the mental disorder and mental health in general. Tom was the recipient of the 2019 IOCDF Hero Award. Tom speaks at the annual OCD conference along with different schools around the Northeast. He also appeared in a variety of blogs and podcasts as well. The topic Tom is particularly passionate about is athletes and OCD and how it affects performance, along with the stigma of mental health in sports. Tom.
That introduction makes me seem a lot better than I am.
You wrote it. No.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about this topic, especially. I think I can almost guarantee that everybody that has dealt with OCD in their lives has had that experience of social anxiety at some point in their journey with OCD. So I think it's an extremely prevalent topic, and I was really excited to be invited on for this specific episode.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you, and I think that is all. It is extremely prevalent. I know I dealt with a lot of social anxiety and probably still do to a certain extent, and I know, Tom, you have as well. I'd be curious. I always like in this format to ask questions of our viewers, and I'm super curious. Those of you, so incidentally, so words have been hard today, and that's not a good thing for you all, because when words are hard in my day, it's not the best day to do a live, but that's okay. We're going to muddle through it and just live with the discomfort around imperfection. So, and thank you for that question, Lewis. Feel free to load the comments with questions, and we will answer them most definitely. So I want to ask everyone, have you experienced some sort of social anxiety, or do you have social anxiety disorder? And if so, how does it manifest for you? What do you struggle with, or how do you struggle with it? Give us a little insight into what you deal with, and obviously we'll share with you as well, and maybe we can start up a conversation about this particular subject. It is, I think, thank you, Fran. I appreciate that. And it is a comorbidity month. We are talking about a variety of co-occurring conditions, in this case, social anxiety and OCD. So we'll always wait a second for the thread to sort of start filling up here. And as long as we're waiting, Lewis, we're both lived experience, Tom and I, OCD. I don't know a lot about schizotypal personality disorder. I don't have a lot of insight into it. I can definitely give you insight into what OCD is, but I really don't have any experience speaking to STPD. I don't know if Tom does.
I don't.
But if the best thing I could help you with is we'll give you an email address. You could definitely email us, and we could get you more information. But I don't know a whole lot about how schizotypal personality disorder affects an individual. But we can definitely give you some insight into OCD for sure. So hold on to that question, and we can elaborate for you. Alexandra wrote, "Yep, really good when I have a layer." 7:10 p.m. Fran, when I have a layer in between me and my audience, but when I'm one-on-one with people, I get extremely nervous. Sometimes I try to cancel plans because I get so uncomfortable. I know I can relate to that, Tom.
Yeah, definitely can. I definitely can relate to that. Go ahead. Were you say something? I'm sorry.
No, I was going to realize that it's the Alexandra who clearly doesn't live in Puerto Rico. I'm out of it today. Hi, Alex. It's good to see you. Yeah, no, for me, and I think I agree. I could talk to, the more people, the more comfortable I feel. The smaller a room, the more nervous I feel. So I definitely relate a lot.
Yeah.
Beth, go ahead, Tom.
I think I'm able to kind of hide, like Alexander said, you have a layer in between you and the audience. You have a layer in between the people around you, so it's easier to kind of sit in the corner and relax without being kind of pressed by people. When you're one-on-one, if you're not talking, there's just awkward silence, and you're just looking at each other. So it is very tough to be one-on-one with somebody, especially somebody that doesn't understand OCD. I find it incredibly easy to be around people that have OCD one-on-one, because I can randomly say one of my obsessions and they're like, oh my gosh, you have the same obsession. And so we easily connect. But when you're with people that don't have any sort of mental health background or a mental health disorder or OCD, it can be kind of hard to relate to one another and actually be able to, open up and feel not anxious in that kind of situation.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And thank you, Tom, for that insight. Beth, not on topic, but have you ever considered on doing TV commercials on TV and radio for OCD? I've done TV and radio, and I haven't thought about doing OCD commercials, but I'm open if any foundation is looking to do radio or television for their foundation, and it happens to be on OCD. I am available. Please call me.
We're doing IOCDF commercials.
That's it. We're going to do IOCDF commercials. Lewis wrote, I have pure O. And what that usually is it stands for pure OCD, which is a mental type of OCD. It's OCD with mental rituals and mental compulsions. And so not outward compulsions. So the obsessions happen mentally, and the compulsions happen mentally as well. It can be, a very taboo subject, especially around sexual and violent intrusive thoughts. And so Lewis, I definitely, you wrote OCD ruminations and STPD ruminations. This is what I can say, Lewis, and you feel free to answer this. Do you have a diagnosis of STPD? Do you have a diagnosis of OCD? Because you said STPD rumination. So I'm wondering if you're afraid you have STPD, you have a diagnosis of OCD, and that is a fear of yours. Just curious, not looking to diagnose, but I know for me, I asked all the questions and thought I was crazy most of the time. So, and looked for like answers of psychosis and things like that. So please feel free to elaborate. And I also, as people are just coming in, we're talking about social anxiety, we're talking about OCD. We've got Tom Smalley on here, who's amazing and has a lot of insight into social anxiety. So we asked, do you struggle? Have you struggled with social anxiety or social anxiety disorder? And if so, how does it manifest for you? How does it come up for you? What do you experience? What are some things that you find challenging, or how have you coped with it? Really, as you know, Just Ethan has become a conversation between, well, now all of us, Tom, myself, and you. So please feel free to lean in. Stephanie wrote.
Yeah,
ahead,
I was just about to say, you can read it. What Stephanie wrote.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely relate to that on a pretty personal level. I have what I call karma OCD. So whenever something good happens in my life, I feel like something bad is going to happen as well, because it needs to cancel out the good. And so I actually like almost look for things to go wrong, and I don't really get to celebrate those small victories. So obviously this isn't really about social anxiety, but I really resonate with that comment, because I always feel like, one, when I stop one obsession, OCD tries to find something else new, right? Like with OCD, it attacks everything you love. And when you get rid of one thing and you feel good about how you've conquered that obsession and resisted that compulsion, now it starts attaching onto other things. And I think for me, that's very common for myself. But I really relate to that, definitely.
I do too. And I can relate to it from an anxiety perspective. I mean, when I was really struggling with OCD, I always found that when my life got better, my OCD got worse. And I think it was mostly out of self-sabotage too, because I was very afraid that I was like, surely this can't be, it's the higher you are, the higher the further you have to fall. And that scared me. So the better I was doing, OCD would become a little bit louder because of that. So I relate to that as well. Even today, though my OCD doesn't so much get in my way, I definitely relate to that in terms of anxiety, and not necessarily social anxiety, just general anxiety. I was talking. Katie just popped on. My girlfriend, when we traveled a lot this summer, and like when we try and unplug, I know my brain starts to look for things to worry about. And I could literally have nothing to worry about. I worked. Nothing was really on my mind. And the minute I have some time off, instead of just being present, my mind immediately goes to who doesn't like me, who hates me, what did I say? Did I say it wrong? Is there this thing? No, there's this thing I didn't worry about. What am I to do? I start looking. My brain just starts searching for all this stuff. My anxiety just starts going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. So I totally relate to that, whether it's OCD, symptomatology, or anxiety, or whatever it is. Yeah, Tom, you made a great point, and so did Stephanie. So thank you for that. Beth wrote, I'm learning about the different types of OCD. Yes, there are lots and lots of different types. And oh man, it's me or you. I'm really choppy again, huh? Tom, am I choppy to you?
Yeah, you're a little choppy to me.
All right. I may go switch locations because I had this problem last time and it was really, really awful. Let me see if I can pick up, Tom. Let me see if I can come out real quick.
So, for me, Stephanie, I saw what you said. If you're with close friends and relatives, you're comfortable with meeting strangers or in group setting, but when you're alone, you're extremely anxious. I think when you have people in a scenario that understand what you're going through with OCD, it's easier for them to help you meet other people. I know when I meet other people and they don't really know what OCD is, it's a lot more difficult to actually relate one-on-one with people and try to explain myself. And a lot of times, what I made the mistake early on was when I was going through treatment was that I led with my OCD. So when I introduced myself, I immediately started talking about OCD because that's what was on the forefront of my mind. I was really, really in a dark place and I was going through treatment and I was proud of how I was doing through treatment and I was hoping to keep improving. And I thought people would resonate with that timeline and that journey, but people were kind of just looking at me like, what? Like, why are you talking about your mental health disorder? And as much as we love to advocate and we love to break that stigma, and I'll continue to talk about that, it's important to let people know. It's important to let people know what you're doing for, outside of OCD. It's important to let people know who you are as a person before OCD. So now when I try to meet new people, it's important to make sure that I know that I have my own identity and I'm not my OCD and I don't lead with my OCD because that has created more social anxiety for me.
Tom, where are we? Fill me in. Give me the lowdown.
I was just talking about how a lot of times I fell into the trap of leading with, when I met people throughout my treatment journey, when I was really in the thick of my OCD and I would push myself to not avoid parties or social gatherings, I was leading with, hi, I'm Tom. And I would, by the 5th minute, I was talking about my OCD and like what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. And to us, that seems completely normal and it's a really good thing to talk about. But when you talk about it with people you just meet, it's a lot harder to adjust on the fly and relate to one another. So it's important to really find that identity and realize that it's okay to make sure that we love talking about OCD and we like to advocate for OCD, but it's also okay to be someone have an identity and not immediately lead with OCD, in order to understand the situation that you're in and the social gathering that you're in, feeling the setting that you're in, trying to be grounded in understanding that I'm trying to make new friends, that kind of thing. Maybe don't lead with that.
That's a great point. I mean, first of all, OCD is not identity.
Right. And it's nothing to be ashamed. I should add, it's not that I'm ashamed or that it's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm very proud of what I have done with OCD and what we've overcome, what Ethan's overcome with OCD, and how helpful his advocacy work has been for people. But like when we lead and are trying to be social, the initial reaction with OCD is a very puzzled, confused look or a kind of a step back.
But also, it's sort of like the question I get all the time about dating OCD and when do I divulge that I have OCD to my partner. Yep. And the reality is like, this isn't the case for everybody, and this is not a perfect answer or a perfect science, but the idea is that, you're not leading with your OCD because your OCD doesn't define who you are. And so I'm still getting, no, you're good, Tom. At least no one else is choppy. It's just me. Nobody loves me. I don't know if I'm understandable. Tom.
No, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I was having them last week or last time too. I need to figure out something else. Pay no attention if I'm not moving. I'm probably better looking if I'm blurry. Anyway, so my point is that, we can't define ourselves. We don't want to lead, as Tom said, we don't want to lead with our OCD only because it's not who we are. It's a disorder and disease that we have. It doesn't define us. We're not our OCD. We are not our disease. The disease is not a decision, right? We always talk about those things, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about it. But, we are more than our disorder. We're more than our disease, and we should not self-identify with it because that's not all we are. And so I think that, sometimes it feels like a need to confess or a need to like explain yourself or give all the details of your life in order to like make things more comfortable. Whereas sitting with discomfort and understanding, like looking for other things to give of yourself to other people and let them learn other aspects of you. Right. So the reason I correlate that to dating is, when you get to a place of maintenance and management, on a first date, you don't need to talk about your OCD. It isn't who you are. It's not what you're doing all the time. If I'm advocating, that's one thing, but similar to someone that, may have gone through cancer treatment and is now in remission for 4 years. For someone with OCD, I have to say this right now. And if I don't, I'm not being honest. I'm not being truthful. They need to know this about me. When in reality, like somebody that's been in remission for 4 years from cancer, like that may or may not come up just because that's not who they are anymore. And if it is who you are now, then that's something you'll work through. But I think that's what Tom is alluding to anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh man, I think my connection is getting worse here. So I'm going to hand it over to Tom for a second. And I'm going to try a different setup. So be right with you. Help me, Lord. All right.
Sorry, everybody, for the technical difficulties. Yeah, I mean, Mike, I saw your question. This is something that I wanted to highlight. Why do people who suffer with OCD have to label their type of OCD? I have contamination OCD. I have this type of OCD. My question is, why does it make you uncomfortable that people talk about it like that? Is there a reason why you feel uncomfortable when they label it, or do you think it makes it more taboo maybe? Because I know when my therapist talked about my intrusive thoughts with me and labeled them sexual intrusive, that really freaked me out. And I actually felt a little uncomfortable too. So, I mean, I can see why. I'm kind of just interested in what your thinking is to why you're uncomfortable with that, because I too felt the same way when I said I had violent and sexual intrusive thoughts, obsessions. That to me, that seemed like dangerous, and I didn't want to be labeled as dangerous. So I think it can be a little scary for people that haven't had a diagnosis for that long and don't really know that OCD has those subtypes, and those are the ones that have been researched and recorded and studied and have come up time and time again. So I think we use these subtypes because it helps us connect with people more. When I say I have sexual or violent intrusive thoughts, I'm able to connect with somebody immediately that has violent and sexual intrusive thoughts, and maybe we have the same thoughts. Or if I have contamination OCD, now I'm able to talk about my contamination OCD, and maybe someone relates to that side of OCD more. And the fact is that OCD is OCD in a nutshell, right? It's never going to be black and white. When I first got my diagnosis of OCD, I was struggling mainly with sexually intrusive and violent intrusive thoughts. Now I struggle with what my therapist call karma OCD that I mentioned earlier. So I think it does change to an extent, and can change to an extent here and there when we start trying to fight those obsessions. One big thing for me is that as much as I labeled my OCD, I had to feel like I had to say, oh, I only have sexual intrusive thoughts, or I only have violent intrusive thoughts, because at the same time, that did freak me out. Like I said before, it did freak me out a little bit because I was new to my diagnosis, and to say that something sexual or violent was attached to me, even though OCD isn't our identity, at that time, OCD was everything. It was taking over my life. So it did feel like my identity. So when we put those terms in front of it, it actually created a little more anxiety and made me uncomfortable too. But I really think the subtypes are helpful because I see Alexandra agreed too. They're very helpful about finding information, and that's how we find more resources. It's a lot easier to find more resources about specific subtypes. So now it's easier to connect people. So I think that's really why we use those subtypes. And I'm sure Ethan, his visual is clear, and I'm sure he can kind of touch on why we use those subtypes. But for me, it definitely freaked me out at first. But just understand that those subtypes aren't attached to you. They're just the type of thoughts we're having. Those were the type of intrusive thoughts we're having. Like I have just right OCD. It's easier to label things in order to get more specific help for those certain subtypes.
Yeah, so I'm so sorry for the technical issues. I apologize. I don't know what's going on. So I'll get that sorted out. Hopefully this is clearer and working better. Yeah, much better. Okay, good. Don't spend a lot of money on a computer because apparently they never work. Anyway, I have a feeling you're referring. Are you talking about Mike Snow's question?
Yeah, we are. I was just saying that it really popped out to me. I felt uncomfortable with those subtypes, but I could see how you would feel uncomfortable with those, because for me, like I've been saying for the past 7 minutes, like I was definitely a little bit freaked out when my therapist was like, oh, so you have sexual intrusive thoughts, or you have violent intrusive thoughts, because it felt like she was labeling me. And me and my therapist are like this now. We've been together, seeing each other for 7 years, right? So, but when I just met her, it was like, no, I'm not violent. No, I don't have sexual intrusive thoughts. Like, even though I did, it just felt like it was attached to me. So it made me feel uncomfortable. But until I learned that subtypes are there to help us find better resources and connect people with those certain subtypes.
Yeah. The other thing, I mean, I'll use the cancer analogy again. And I saw that Lewis talked about he was diagnosed with pure O. And again, we're all talking about OCD. It's OCD, right? And so, you may always hear that, oh, content doesn't matter. I think it does to a certain extent. I think subtypes are important for all the reasons Tom said. But if you think about it in terms of cancer, and there's different, cancer's cancer, but there's a variety of kinds, right? Depending on what kind of cancer you have. And with that, you can then hone in on the treatment and get specific and target and stuff like that. The other reason subtyping is important at least obviously from an academic perspective and a clinical perspective. But if you're going to get therapy and treatment, generally an initial, like being able to subtype or having a subtype to relate to, the content is important in the beginning because it allows you to learn exposure and response prevention. It's your gateway into that, right? You need something specific in your own experiences with OCD to then learn ERP and learn how to engage it. And that's why content and subtype is also important in those beginning stages of treatment and therapy, is because, you need something to grasp onto when you're in the middle of treatment and when you're learning treatment and therapy. And then from there, you start to learn that OCD at the end of the day is a giant tornado. It's a giant tornado and it's sucking things in, and it's a cow and it's a house and it's this and it's that. And content may or may not matter, but at the end of the day, it's just this giant thing, and OCD is OCD. But with that, to Tom's point, when you're Googling, when you're looking, when you're trying to connect, the dots and understand for yourself, it's important. When you're engaging in treatment and learning treatment, it's important. And I don't know, Tom, if you touched on this, but just connecting with others, it's meaningful, especially from I'm going to raise this up a little bit. It's meaningful from a connection standpoint. I think I can make this assumption that we all in this room have OCD, right? I'm assuming we do. And so we all feel connected and we all feel a certain bond with each other. But I promise you, if I said, I really struggle with a fear of throwing up, then the 3 people or 4 people that also have it, like, oh my God, me too. Like if you haven't heard that before, or if I say something that I'm thinking and you have those same thoughts, now we've gone a level deeper in connection. And like, you may email me afterwards and say, oh my gosh, I have those thoughts too. I thought I was the only one. And it's for those reasons that, kind of breaking it down is meaningful and important.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
And thanks, Tom, for covering me. The truth is, I just knew I was going to have technical difficulty, so I brought Tom on to cover while I did. So thank you. Kelly wrote, I always think someone is looking up and down at what I'm wearing. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I have all these feelings. And then if someone starts talking to me, I sound stupid. I'm too worried about what they are thinking. So yeah, that's very common with social anxiety. And any type of judgment, any judgment situation. What am I wearing? What am I saying? What am I doing? I have days, I don't know if y'all have this. I have days where like I feel really smart, and other days where I think I sound really smart, and other days where I think I sound really stupid. Nothing I said makes sense. It all sounds like just jumbo, and just a mess. So so I can definitely relate to that. Stephanie, lol, you look awesome. Oh, you're awesome, Ethan. Thank you. See, I read into that. Kelly wrote, I'm doing something wrong. Then I'm like, why did I go out to this restaurant when I can be sitting at home? I hate that. Yeah, for sure. I think social anxiety manifests in a variety of ways. Man, I don't know about you, Tom, despite having, I think I always had a pretty significant amount of social anxiety just because of my OCD. And research has shown that the prevalence of social anxiety disorder, there's more prevalence of social anxiety disorder within individuals that have OCD than without. So it makes sense. For me, it was all about, I don't want people to see what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, how I'm compulsing. It was so hard to hide in public, that I just didn't want to be in public because I didn't want to have to hide it. What's that, Tom?
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think you're about to lead on to what I was going to ask the viewers, if anybody else has dealt with avoidance, because like that was, for me, social anxiety revolved around avoidance. That was like that was my MO. I avoided any social situation, family gatherings. To this day, I still have trouble going to family gatherings, even though I love my family, all my big cousins, and they're all supportive, but I just always feel very anxious when I'm at those family gatherings. I avoid a lot of friend situations in big groups. I have a few very close friends that I'd rather hang out with that know about my past and what I go through every day. I don't like being around a lot of people at a time. And so especially when I've gotten better over the years now through treatment and doing my maintenance work, but when I was going through treatment, I was so paranoid that people were going to find out about OCD that I would just avoid situations. And I also avoided situations because I thought they were going to trigger me. And if I start compulsing, then I was going to even be more socially anxious. So I'm interested to see what people have to say about that. I think I definitely struggled mightily with avoidance.
I did too, for sure. I was looking back at some of the statements, and tell me if you talked about it, Tom. I don't want to. Stephanie wrote about feeling anxious when she was alone versus when she's with close friends and relatives. And she said, if that makes sense. And yeah, that makes total sense. The minute we have a moment for our mind to be quiet, or we're not distracted or in a routine, anxiety tends to tick up. Thoughts, disturbing thoughts, OCD thoughts, whatever, also start to tick up. And so that is very, very common.
I think sure. I also, if I might interject, I think I also I looked really tired from my OCD. I was fatigued because I was doing 14 hours of compulsions a day, and I was leaving 10 hours for school, sleep, eating, extracurricular activities. So I was really tired because I was mentally exhausted. I was physically exhausted. I was emotionally drained from therapy. And so when I went to these family gatherings and these social gatherings with friends, I always felt like I had a target on my back because it was so obvious that something was wrong with me because I looked so exhausted.
That makes sense, Tom. And I think the point I was going to get at is, I never thought of myself as having social anxiety because I was a social person. I like to be around people and friends, or so I thought. And, I was also in the entertainment industry. So like being in front of the camera, being the center of attention, all that stuff didn't really scare me. And so, I always thought of myself as somebody that did not have any type of social anxiety. In retrospect, I had a ton, and I was super uncomfortable with all of those things. But I think the most profound thing that I remember in terms of social anxiety was when my OCD was sort of at its worst. And I remember having gone from somebody similar to the way I am now, which is I like to speak in public. I like to talk with friends. I literally forgot how to communicate with people. Like I did not know when I was at my worst and just starting therapy. I remember going to the mall and my doctor would say to me, Ethan, we really have to work on your social anxiety. And I'm like, I don't have social anxiety. I was an actor. I did all this stuff. And they're like, okay, we'll go in, to that store and ask for a job application. I was like, I didn't know how to talk to people anymore. I didn't know what words to use. I mean, I had been so quiet for so long and so stuck in my head ruminating that I literally lost, the ability from just lack of practice and exercise on how to communicate. And so the level of anxiety I felt in social situations was through the roof. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. Or Tom, if you can relate to that.
No, I definitely can relate to that. I think what I struggled with most was I gained all that time back after treatment and didn't have my identity. So I didn't know how to present myself to people. And maybe I knew how to talk to people, but I didn't know what to say about myself. I didn't know how to act. I had lost those skills like you were just talking about.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So I definitely, it's like those are human skills that come by practice and repetition. And then when you're quiet and reserved for so long because you're dealing with these internal struggles, those kind of get diminished and pushed on the back burner.
That's such a great way to put it, Tom. And they do. And it's just and it plays right into the avoidance. If you avoid something for so long, you have to relearn how to do it. And so that makes total sense. Eric wrote at 723, most of my OCD themes overlap with social anxiety, but moral scrupe and BDD are probably the worst. I used to go around thinking that everyone was looking at me and judging me and I was doing everything wrong. And I know, Eric, so many of us, including Tom and I, can relate to that. And it's hard to know. I mean, it's hard to know. And I don't know that it's necessarily important, but it's hard to know, what's anxiety disorder and what's usual life. Like I'm not super comfortable with my own body, and I'm just not. I've never been pleased with it. I don't know that I have BDD. I haven't been diagnosed with it, but there are imperfections that I don't like about it. And so when I get put into social situations, especially like, especially living in LA, I found myself not going out as much just because I was very uncomfortable. Everybody was hip and cool and dressed and stuff like that. And, you know, I always felt like the odd man out, and I would get really anxious, and I would go and do things, but I just was never really super comfortable doing that. You know, so it always begs the question, like, and it isn't something to sit around and to sort of dissect and figure out, but it does beg the question, you know, I guess if I wasn't willing to go do those things, you know, maybe then it may move over into the disorder versus, you know, just anxiety or just lack of self-confidence or whatever.
Right. Well, going off of that, I think I too dealt with not the part of being an awesome actor and living in LA, but I was dealing with the fact that I didn't feel fully confident in going out. So when you don't protrude that confidence, it's a lot harder to feel established in a social setting, especially if you don't understand who you are as a person and you're just going out there. It's a lot more difficult to actually hold conversations and explain, you know, what you do for a living and use those social skills. So, I mean, I think for me, I have BDD. I have it's my subtype of BDD is muscle dysmorphia. And for me, it was being around a lot of different strength coaches that were a lot stronger than I was and a lot bigger than me. And so when I go to these conferences and I see them, it's just, I get reserved when it's funny because I'm in front of a room of athletes and I'm loud. And then when I'm with all these coaches, now I'm quiet because I feel small physically and like just emotionally, mentally compared to them. And then I think another thing about the worrying about that somebody is mad at me or watching me or somebody's always upset with me. I think one thing that I realized is that at work that happens a lot too. One thing that I realized is that your boss isn't always going to be like smiley and hi, how are you? And for me, like, I'm a very wear my heart on sleeve type of person. I'm an emotional dude, and it was tough for me to realize that. So I would always take any sort of like facial expression as that wasn't a smile as like, oh gosh, I did something wrong, or and it made me feel self-conscious when in reality it was nothing he was doing and he wasn't even thinking about me or anything. It was just me internalizing it and reading into things. And I think OCD has really done that for me, and made my life more challenging at work because of that, because I always feel like I have someone watching me and disappointed in me at work.
That's like every Zoom meeting I've had for the last year. It's so funny because I almost said that. I get that way, you know, and I've learned to live with the discomfort. And sometimes I'll shoot somebody an email just to make sure, you know.
Yeah, 100%. I think I actually did that to Liz like 3 weeks ago. I was like, hey, when I said that, she was like, no, like, I'm not giving you reassurance. And I was like, dang, you're good.
I always know, you know, but I do, like, if you know, I could be on a call with 7, 10, 18 people. And if, you know, I say something and then somebody makes a weird face, I'm like, oh my God, what did I say? Why do they feel that way? Is everything ruined? You know, and it's interesting. Like, I somehow get from somebody making a face to death. I don't know how I get there, but somehow that's going to kill me. Cause it's like, oh my God, they made the face. They're mad at me. They're going to say something. I'm going to lose my job. Then I'll lose everything else that I have.
You're catastrophizing.
I go all the way down until I like fall into a volcano somehow. I don't know how I get to the volcano, but I do. So I totally relate to that. And, you know, of course it attacks the things that we care about. You know, like, work is important to us.
Yeah, and I think work isn't, you know, when we say social anxiety, I think a lot of times we think about like social gatherings and friends and family, but work is a social place. It's a social gathering in a sense of that that's where you spend a lot of your time and you're around other people. So it's still relationships and social interaction. So there's still plenty of anxiety in there.
Yeah, for sure. And I can always tell And because it attacks the things that we care about, I can always tell when I deeply care about something, because my emails, it's really, really funny. I can always pinpoint the OCD in my emails, because if it's somebody I care about or something that I care about, my email usually starts something to the effect of, hey, hope this email finds you well and you had a great Tuesday. Anyway, I was wondering if blah, 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 blah. Hope you're doing well and have a great rest of your week, and say hi to your kids and flowers are on the way. Sincerely, Ethan.
Yeah.
Like, they're always like that. But something that I literally could care less about, I'm like, hey, do you have that thing? No signature, no adjectives, no flowery word, just like one sentence. It's just, and I can always pinpoint. It's just, I get it.
Subject is hi.
Yeah, I don't even put a subject.
Yeah,
just,
no subject.
Is that, did you get it yet? Yeah, that's all I say. With a question mark, and I sound agitated. Stephanie wrote, is your knowledge on OCD from experience? Yes, we are both, individuals with OCD become advocates. Doesn't mean that we don't struggle with OCD, but all our knowledge comes from a lived experience perspective. We are not clinicians. We are not diagnosing. We are giving you our insight from our own personal experiences. Pauline asked, how can you explain OCD to someone? Great question, Tom. He's feeling social anxiety right now.
Yeah. I think the way I kind of explain OCD is that I give them kind of that textbook definition of OCD is an anxiety, a chronic anxiety disorder that affects a lot of people, and it is it contains it contains obsessions and compulsions, right? And obsessions are intrusive thoughts that we know are irrational, but we can't quite get rid of those thoughts and fully believe that they're irrational. And so we have unwanted images and thoughts in our head, and we ruminate all the time. And then we do compulsions because we're trying to offset that excruciating anxiety. And then usually they never talk to me again.
Ouch. Way to encourage. As I feel judgment from this angle of the camera. I liked it up higher. I will tell you, and thank you. That's an excellent definition, Pauline. I'm gonna ask a follow-up, which is rhetorical, but I think how you explain it to someone depends on who you're explaining it to.
For sure. I think that's why I think that's why I didn't have a clear-cut answer, because when I'm talking to somebody that I kind of know, it's a little bit easier to explain a certain intrusive thought and give them examples. But when I'm talking about to a total stranger, I want to give them that textbook answer that's going to educate them immediately, and just so they understand that it's a real thing and we need to break the stigma around it.
Absolutely. So I think, if you're talking to a dear friend, or somebody that you're comfortable opening up with, it could be simple as, I get these really scary thoughts or these uncomfortable thoughts, and they give me a lot of anxiety. And then I have to, do these X, you can say compulsions, you can say what it is you're doing, that makes me feel more comfortable. And that in essence is OCD. You don't have to, be scientific or clinical with it. It can literally be what your experience is. If you're not comfortable saying that and you're like I have OCD, and they're like, well, what is that? It's like, oh, well, I struggle with a lot of, intense and scary thoughts or images, or perfectionism, or feeling not, just not right, or wanting to feel just right. And, I get anxiety and I have to perform certain rituals or compulsions to alleviate the anxiety. And, you can keep it simple, but I think it's important to know who you're talking to. Also, you don't have to put the onus on you. If you can find videos or things to watch, IOCDF has a ton of resources, and find other people to explain it for you. Sometimes that's a better way, especially if depending on how much you personally understand it. So you can always look for other resources to help explain it for you, and that might be a better option. But don't feel like you have to. You don't owe anyone an explanation, and I. And so, don't feel like you have to talk about it. If it's something you want to talk about, then, or if somebody straight up asks you for whatever reason, you can even be as general as what's OCD. It's a mental illness,
right?
You don't have to, only divulge what you're comfortable with.
Very true.
Beth wrote to that line, sure, I didn't tell a date I had OCD until I felt comfortable with them, maybe a few months after dating. And I think for people that are really struggling with OCD, you know, maybe that feels misleading or like you're lying or withholding the truth. At the end of the day, Beth, I don't know where you were, but I like that. That's cool to me, because I don't think we should ever have to feel like we're wronging someone because we haven't told them about our OCD until we're ready. Just like you don't offer up all kinds of information about yourself until you're comfortable and ready to do it. And that's no different. Go ahead, Tom.
My social security number is nice to meet you. My financials are like, you don't do that, right? Like Ethan said, you know, we don't tell them what's in our bank account. We don't tell them, you know, about our whole past. We let the thing about dating is letting the person understand you and know you and see if you kind of connect. So I think it's awesome that you let that person understand who you are outside of OCD before you told them about OCD. So they saw how awesome you were before you even knew about OCD, before they even knew about OCD.
Exactly, because it doesn't define you, you know. And if you're in a place, I always say this hesitantly, but you know, because I never want it to sound mean, but if you're in a place, you know, where you are compulsing, you know, and ritualizing 8, 10, 12 hours a day, you know, it may not be the best time to date. You know, it really may not be, because you might want to get that to a place where you can actually focus on a relationship and not your OCD. And I'm not saying that if you are dating, you should break up. And I'm not saying that's a rigid rule, you know, but you do want to be in a healthier place so you can give attention to the relationship and make sure that the relationship isn't giving attention to the OCD. Not a perfect science. There isn't always a black and white answer to that.
No.
I like what Eric wrote about subtypes and themes. If it's okay, we'll just go a couple minutes over, because I feel like it's soccer. Like you get the time back. Running time. Yeah, we'll just go a couple minutes. But Eric wrote types themes of OCD are meant to help. It's 7:28 p.m. Thank you for Fran's the man. To help you understand it, but can be a problem if you get too rigid thinking about it. Your OCD may be similar to others, but will always be unique. Such a great point, Eric. And I think it's important to note that, like, you know, definitely help you understand it and engage in treatment. But at a certain point, you slowly learn that ERP works for all subtypes. It doesn't matter what it is. Yes, there's nuances and different changes and ways to approach it that might be subtle differences. But I think if we do get hung up on our subtypes, or think that one is different than another, or, you know, or we treat it like a completely different animal, then we might, you know, underserve our ability to get better. Because at the end of the day, ERP and acceptance commitment therapy and all these great treatments are effective regardless of your subtype, you know. And I'm not saying that one subtype may or may not be harder than the other. I'm simply saying that the treatment works and the subtype doesn't negate the treatment. And so you don't want to get, at the end of the day, your whole goal is to live with uncertainty, be okay not being okay, you know, live with the discomfort. Embrace not knowing, maybe not. And that applies to literally every subtype of OCD and every symptom. And so that's where you don't want to get overly bogged down in the symptoms and subtypes. Go ahead, Tom. I know you had thoughts.
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, honestly. And it's called extra time. Eric got it. We have some extra time, like the soccer match. So, I mean, I think what you said is really, really important. I think we don't get lost in the subtypes. I think that we can kind of relate to those subtypes, but we don't have to necessarily, you know, stick to them and say we are these specific subtypes. You know, it varies. Our range is going to be, when you have OCD, you have OCD, and it doesn't mean you just have violent intrusive thoughts. You just have sexual intrusive thoughts. You just have just right OCD. And it doesn't mean that one is going to be, like you said, easier to treat, but it allows us to kind of diagnose in a way that's going to help us, is going to be more beneficial to us throughout treatment.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's also important to note that, you know, there are certain symptoms and subtypes that are more stigmatized because of lack of publicity, or the media doesn't talk about it, or whatever. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to understand that. And maybe some clinicians will disagree. I think that, no symptom is better or worse. They're all miserable, whether it's hand washing.
No OCD is fun OCD.
No, right. Whether it's hand washing or pedophilia OCD, it's all awful and terrible. But there is certain things that are more stigmatized, than others.
Right.
And we can acknowledge
Right.
that, but the treatment doesn't change.
Remains the same, because
Yeah.
the treatment is all about living with that discomfort and that excruciating anxiety and learning how to cope with that anxiety and not give into those compulsions. So it doesn't really matter what subtype it is. You're still not going to give into the compulsions that subtype is telling you to give into.
For sure. Perfectly said. Elizabeth, and I appreciate all the comments, and I know we're getting close on time, so I want to try and seek out the questions, but thank you for all the comments, and I'll give an email at the end, and you can elaborate further. Elizabeth at 739 wrote, how do you respond if you don't want to tell someone about your OCD, but it seems apparent that you were struggling and they ask invasive questions? I'm never sure how to respond when it is someone I don't want to open up to, or it isn't their business. We touched on this a little bit. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more, or give Tom an opportunity to weigh in, but none of your business. I mean, it's hard because you feel like you're put in a position where you should disclose, but replace that with like, trigger warning, but replace that was hi, nice to meet you. So when was the first time you lost your virginity? It's like, excuse me? It's like, I'm not answering that. I think
Right.
we feel like we have to say something. It's part of our sort of confessing nature of OCD. I think it's okay to not ask. I'm not comfortable talking about that, or I appreciate the question. I'm not going to answer that. Can we talk about something else? Or if they keep digging, just be like, I'm going to walk away now, respectfully. I think there are a lot of things you can do, and it's going to make you uncomfortable. But if you're not ready to share, or it's not someone you want to share with, or it's none of their business, then you just have to stand up to that. I don't know, Tom, if you have any additional thoughts.
Yeah. No, I think, this might come off harsh, but the reality in life is that you don't owe anybody anything. You don't owe anybody an explanation. You don't owe anybody the right to know about your personal struggle if you don't want them to. So you don't ever have to feel compelled or like that you're withholding information about it, because that's your own journey and your own personal struggle. Ethan and I choose to share it, and we choose to advocate, and I love advocating. I know Ethan loves advocating. I know all of our advocates at the IOCDF love advocating. But if you don't want to share, you don't owe people the explanation or owe people anything in this life. It's your own battle to fight. So you don't owe anybody an explanation. And that's just what I wanted to emphasize.
For sure. I see there's some comments on alcohol and OCD, and for those of you that are that do it rely on alcohol or other substances, A, you're not alone. B, it's extremely common. C, yeah, it does make you feel better, and that's why you keep doing it. But it is co-occurring comorbid month as we've made it, and substance use disorder is a co-occurring condition. Not diagnosing anyone here, but it is all too common and all too dangerous. And I see some great advocacy in the comments. And so thank you for that. I will say you can definitely go on. I don't know if we have any articles on the IOCDF on SUD. I know we do actually. And OCD. If you want to put a link to Riley's Wish, which is a great nonprofit that talks about substance use as well as OCD, which are very common co-occurring conditions. But the advice that you're getting on alcohol and OCD is really good advice from individuals, and it doesn't have to be your choice. It is uncomfortable, sort of walk through the fire, but once you do, it is.
Yeah, and I mean, I can relate to that too, especially through college. I used alcohol as a crutch to try to be able to socialize and kind of numb that social anxiety. And I struggled a lot with it and ended up drinking heavily and falling into that trap, thinking it was going to help me when really it just hurt me more. And I was less able to be social because I wasn't able to make decisions, and I was not who I actually am. So I think it's very common to see. One, you're never that's very, very common to turn to that because you feel like you don't have no other options to numb that anxiety, because it can be really, really stressful being in those situations. Also, what Katie O'Dunn said, you can advocate in different ways. There are a lot of ways to advocate with however much or little you wish to share. It goes along with the thing that I was just saying, you don't owe anybody anything. You can give what you want to give. You give to the world what you want to give, and you shouldn't ever feel any remorse or feel guilty that you didn't give more than you did. and also Steven Rosenberg Fernandez. I'm very grateful you found this live feed as well. We're happy to have you.
Absolutely. And all the comments and questions. We're just about out of time. I was going to see quickly, Stephanie asked, do you think it's harder to become a therapist if you suffer from OCD? I can tell you that there's some brilliant therapists and clinicians that have OCD, psychiatrists, psychologists. Liz McIngvale, who's a national advocate of ours, is an incredible therapist. She runs the Houston OCD clinic, McLean, and has OCD as well. I think if you mean it's harder from a personal level, I guess that depends on the individual's journey with OCD and where they are in the moment. A lot of people would argue that, individuals and therapists with OCD and clinicians with OCD that are treating OCD have more insight, that isn't to say that a clinician that doesn't have OCD can't treat it just as effectively. And make no mistake, and it's important, I want to hit this home, that you do not need OCD to treat OCD. And that becomes, I didn't want to say that by saying they may have more insight. I think that it's important. A lot of those of us feel like, well, you can't understand because you don't have what we have, and I think we go in a lot of times to treatments thinking that, and it's important to understand that we absolutely can be treated by individuals that don't have OCD, just like any other.
Because they studied years of school to be trained in ERP, and that's what we need them for, the ERP, because we're not training our ERP.
Yeah, for sure. So, but to answer your question, I think here's my answer, and it goes to everybody, which is, access treatment, whatever that looks like for you, and we always try our hardest to help you do that and get better from OCD. And when you do, whether it's becoming a therapist or doing anything that you dream of, no guarantees. Life is hard, but it all should become easier, or at least OCD doesn't get in the way of that. And right. I think that's the broader lesson from that question is replace therapists what it is you want to do, and getting OCD under control with treatment is the way to get there.
Absolutely.
I saw one more question, and thank you, LinkedIn user, for the kind. I think that's our friend in Ghana. Thank you so much for the kind words. I just saw quickly this last question. Which is, I lost it. Diana McDowell at 751 says, just wondering, in your healing journey, what helped you identify unhelpful thoughts aren't true? I like this because it's important to sort of clarify. And I think Tom knows where I'm going to go here. So Tom, you start.
Keep doing this to me.
I don't have to. I can keep going, but I think you know where I'm going to go.
What helped me identify unhelpful thoughts was ERP. What helped me identify that they weren't true was the ERP, and understanding that when I resisted those compulsions, those obsessions didn't come true. And then I started seeing the proof of ERP. And that's how I recognized how unhelpful thoughts aren't true. And I don't know if she meant intrusive unhelpful thoughts. For me, any intrusive thought was the unhelpful thought.
Yeah, I think, Tom's point and more, it's important to acknowledge that, OCD thoughts aren't different from anyone else's thoughts. Thoughts are thoughts are thoughts are thoughts, and everybody has thoughts. And so our thoughts are not unique or special. What's special is the feedback loop that we get into with our thoughts. The reality is, with exposure response prevention, it isn't proving that they're true. It's just living with the uncertainty, be willing to live that they're out there, that the thoughts exist. And whether they come true or not isn't important. It's whether you live according with your values, despite the possibility of them coming true or not. So, the purpose of treatment and therapy isn't to show you helpful thoughts for unhelpful thoughts, or help you determine what's an OCD thought from not an OCD thought, even though you'll slowly learn to hear that OCD voice and differentiate from it. At the end of the day, it's how do I live toward my core values? How do I embrace uncertainty? How do I coexist with the belief that my fear or whatever it is may or may not happen? I don't know. And ERP is not going to bring you any closer to that. It's simply going to quiet down OCD and give you more objectivity and more insight into everything that you're thinking and going through, and realizing that the majority of your OCD thoughts, your thoughts that are looped into OCD, are irrational, and you can choose to let them be there, but not pay attention to them and guide what direction you choose to go in with your choices. And that's really what the healing journey is about. Not so much with like picking the thoughts that are bad and picking the thoughts that are good. It's about taking the thoughts that are locking you up, that are keeping you from moving forward and learning how to cope with them in a healthy way. And that's essentially, by exposing yourself to the fear or the thought, preventing the response, preventing the compulsion, sitting with the anxiety and doing it over and over again until the anxiety decreases. And you suddenly realize, you know what? I don't care if that thought happens or not. Choosing my values and living my life is way more important.
Right.
Tom, any last words on that?
No, I think you hit the nail.
Awesome. Okay. I know we have more questions and thoughts, but unfortunately we have to wrap up. First of all, I want to thank Tom for joining me on Just Ethan.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you're always welcome here. The name won't change, but you're always welcome on Just Ethan. I also always want to thank all of you for joining and becoming advocates and sharing your stories and insights with us in the chat thread. I apologize. I'm looking up because I switched computers, so I'm going to look up at my sort of notes for the remainder. So as always, I want to thank the IOCDF, and I want to thank Fran behind the scenes for working his magic and dealing with my technical difficulties. Beth wrote it great. She said, yes, you learn that fear could happen. The very thing you are afraid of may happen. If they do, it's not because you didn't give in to the OCD. I love that, because the reality is that there is coincidence. Your greatest fear may happen, but you know what? And it has for me, not my greatest fear, but I mean, like, some of the things that I've been deathly afraid of have happened. And it wasn't because I chose to ignore it. It's just because that was life. And the way I like to look at it is, if your big fear is that you're going to get cancer, I've been stuck on cancer and I don't know why. And let's say we predict somebody else knows the future. In 10 years, you're going to get cancer, right? Well, you have two choices. You can either live those 10 years presently in the moment as vibrantly and actively as you want and cross that bridge when you come to it, or you can choose to live as if you have cancer then and get tested and go to the doctor and wonder. And OCD creates the life that we're afraid of, right? If we're afraid of getting sick, we don't go outside and we basically live a sick life. So you have two choices. So yes, some fears are irrational. Some fears are rooted in reality, real event OCD, and they can happen. But how do you want to live that time up until? And that's essentially what we're asking ourselves. So I love that, Beth, because it's not proving that it may or may not. It's just, how are you going to live a value-driven life? Hopefully it won't. But we can't be certain. But we don't want to live constantly protecting ourselves from that thing that may not even happen.
Right.
So yeah, I think I thanked Fran, but he always deserves a second thank you. If you want to check out all our upcoming virtual streams and content, you can visit iocdf.org/peace of mind. Excuse me. There it is right there. Also, tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern, Chris's Corner. He's talking about BDD, body image, and social media. He'll have Robin Stern on from her New York location. She's an excellent therapist. Also has BDD and related disorders and OCD. So you talked about a therapist that also struggles as well. She's a great person to talk to and very insightful and one of the top therapists regarding BDD. I just realized I hope she's told people that. I'm pretty sure she has. If not, I'm in trouble. But anyway, tune in tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern for Chris's Corner. Also, registration is open for the 1 Million Steps for OCD walk. It's coming down to the hour. September 18th, 36 walks are happening around the country, including Boston. You can visit iocdf.org/walk for all the information. Also, the IOCDF conference registration is open October 8th through the 10th. You can visit the conference website and sign up and learn more. It's going to be a fantastic conference. If you don't know, Mayim Bialik is our keynote. If you know her from Big Bang Theory and Blossom, and she's now the host of Jeopardy and lots of exciting things. With that, finally, if you haven't already, you want to be notified about all the programming the IOCDF is having over the next month, be sure to subscribe and follow on Facebook and YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitch.
Ooh, fun.
Hey, now, right over Tom's face. Nailed it.
Hey, Fran. Fun
Nailed
graphics.
it.
Fun graphics, though. Wow.
That was perfect. Last but not least, I always give out my email. I answer this personally. If you have questions, if we didn't get to your question, if you want to elaborate on your questions, or if you have a question for Tom, hit me at justethan@iocdf.org. Just put Tom in the subject line. Or if you don't care about him, don't even put a subject line like we talked about before. Just like say it and leave it alone. But either way, questions for Tom or I, hit me up. I'll always get back to you. Just give me a few days. And if you have questions for the IOCDF, never hesitate to email them at info@iocdf.org. And with that, thank you for sticking around. Haircut, finally, Ethan. Thank you. Yes, I did get a haircut. I appreciate that, Deirdre. Good eye, good eye. Somebody give her a $5 gift card to the IOCDF. Anyway, with that, thank you again, Tom, for joining me. I really appreciate
it. Thank you, Ethan. Always a pleasure.
Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, stay vigilant, feel the feels. Don't let OCD off the hook. And we will see you 2 weeks from tonight, another episode of Just Ethan. Good night.